Elite snipers called the 3,400-meter shot impossible. But when the target shattered, all eyes turned to the quiet data analyst they'd ignored all day. And the myth they thought was a ghost story became terrifyingly real. The air at the Chimera Advanced Tactics Center didn't just carry heat, it was a physical weight. High in the Nevada desert, the sun beat down on the scorched earth, baking the scent of sagebrush and hot metal into every breath. Shimmering heat waves rose from the ground, twisting the distant, rust-colored mountains into surreal shapes. This was a place designed to break things, equipment, spirits, and the very laws of physics. Colonel Marcus Thorne, a man who looked as if he'd been carved from granite and military regulations, stood before the assembly. He surveyed the operators, the absolute best from the SEALs, Marine Recon, and Delta Force, with an impassive gaze. "Gentlemen," his voice cut through the oppressive silence, sharp and clear. "Welcome to the Crucible. Out there, at 3,400 meters, is a steel silhouette. Your challenge today is simple: understand why hitting it is impossible." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. 3,400 meters. Over 2 miles. It was a ludicrous distance, a theoretical exercise in failure. Stepping forward with a confident swagger was Gunnery Sergeant Rex "Hammer" Corrigan, a MARSOC legend whose reputation preceded him. His custom-built .338 Lapua Magnum rifle was an extension of his own ego, etched with small markings that hinted at tours and places that didn't officially appear on maps. "Watch the master class, boys," Corrigan announced, a smirk playing on his lips as he settled into the prone position. He made a show of consulting his Kestrel weather meter and dialing his scope, calling out the variables like a high priest performing a ritual. "Wind's a fickle beast today, gusting 10 to 15 knots, full value from the left. Humidity is non-existent. Barometric pressure is dropping. The Coriolis effect at this range alone is a monster." In the background, almost blending into the beige of the equipment tents, Elara Vance made a small notation on her digital tablet. As the range's data analyst, she was a ghost in government-issue khakis, a part of the logistical machinery that made these high-stakes games possible. Her ash-blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, practical bun, and her ice-blue eyes, shielded by sunglasses, missed nothing. A tiny, faded scar traced a line near her left temple. "What's the spreadsheet jockey even doing out here?" a young Marine whispered to his partner, not bothering to lower his voice. "She should be in an air-conditioned office, calculating our ammo budget." Elara's expression didn't flicker. She tracked the wind flags, her gaze moving from the erratic whipping of the nylon to the subtle dance of heat haze far downrange. Corrigan finished his calculations and took a deep, theatrical breath. He squeezed the trigger. The powerful crack of his rifle echoed across the desolate landscape. A full 3 seconds later, a puff of dust erupted from the dirt, a good 10 feet to the right of the target. Corrigan sat up, feigning nonchalance. "See? Physics is a stubborn beast," he declared to his audience. "Even with perfect math, the atmospheric variables are too chaotic. It's a statistical impossibility." Elara made another note on her tablet, her fingers moving with quiet precision. She had seen something he hadn't. She always did. The afternoon sun became a relentless tormentor, baking the arrogance out of the elite marksmen. One by one, they took their turn on the firing line, and one by one, they failed. A SEAL's round was devoured by a sudden downdraft, vanishing into the shimmering earth. A ranger, after 20 minutes of painstaking calculation, managed to land a shot within 15 feet, a feat that earned him frustrated but respectful nods. Excuses began to poison the air. "My scope's not calibrated for this heat distortion. The wind is shifting every 5 seconds. This is a waste of barrel life." Rex Corrigan, now playing the role of seasoned instructor, walked the line. "This is the lesson, gentlemen. Knowing when not to pull the trigger is the mark of a true operator. Some targets are just out of reach." Elara continued her silent work, moving from equipment cases to ammunition crates, her tablet recording inventory and usage data. She paused near a stack of old, hard-shelled rifle cases marked for decommissioning, her gaze fixed on the distant wind flags. She saw the patterns they all missed, the brief lulls, the predictable cycles in the chaotic gusts. She saw the shot. Not as a calculation, but as a feeling, a fleeting moment of perfect alignment. As the sun began its descent, casting long, stark shadows across the range, Colonel Thorne checked his watch. His expression was one of grim satisfaction. The lesson in humility had been delivered. "All right, that's enough," he announced, his voice booming across the range. "That concludes today's exercise. The data proves the point. Pack it up. We'll review the..." Ping. The sound was utterly alien to the environment. It wasn't the deep crack of a rifle, but a high, clean, resonant ring of metal striking metal. Every head on the range snapped toward the distant target. The steel silhouette, which had shrugged off every near miss all day, rocked violently backward as if struck by an invisible fist. A perfect, dead-center hit. For a full second, there was only stunned silence, broken by the whisper of the wind. Then, chaos erupted. Who fired? Thorne's voice was a thunderclap of rage, his composure shattered. "Which one of you discharged a weapon without my authorization?" The snipers looked at each other, their faces a mixture of confusion and shock. Every man was standing. Every rifle was on its bipod, bolt open. Spotters frantically scanned the surrounding ridges, looking for a prankster or an intruder. "Range control, this is Thorne. Lock down the perimeter. We have an unauthorized discharge," he yelled into his radio. "Sir," a voice trembled. It was the young Marine who had mocked Alara earlier. He was pale, his fingers shaking as he pointed toward the edge of the staging area. "It was her, sir. The data analyst." All eyes, the eyes of the most lethal marksman on the planet, swung toward Alara Vance. She stood motionless by the pile of decommissioned equipment cases, looking down at her tablet as if the entire commotion had nothing to do with her. Colonel Thorne strode toward Alara, his boots crunching on the gravel with menacing purpose. He was a tower of fury, his face flushed a deep red beneath his tan. The other snipers followed at a distance, forming a semicircle of bewildered onlookers. "Ma'am," Thorne's voice was low and dangerous. "Did you just discharge a weapon on my range?" Alara looked up from her tablet. Her ice-blue eyes met his without a trace of fear. "I did, Colonel," she replied, her voice soft but clear. The tension broke as Corrigan let out a bark of incredulous laughter. "That's impossible," he scoffed, stepping forward. "With what? That museum piece?" He gestured to the rifle case at Alara's feet, an old, battered container for a Barrett M82A1, a heavy .50 caliber relic considered too cumbersome and imprecise for this kind of work. That thing couldn't hit the broad side of a mountain from this distance. "This is not a joke," Thorne roared, silencing Corrigan with a glare. He turned back to Alara, his eyes narrowing. "I need to see your identification. Now." Alara reached into the pocket of her khaki pants and produced a standard government ID card. She handed it to him. Thorne snatched the card, his eyes scanning it with angry impatience. Then, he froze. The name was unremarkable, Alara Vance. But it was the designation beneath it, a small line of text he almost missed, that made the blood drain from his face. Project Chimera. The Colonel's expression transformed in stages. Fury melted into confusion. Confusion gave way to disbelief. And disbelief was replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated awe. He looked from the card to the quiet woman standing before him, and suddenly he wasn't seeing a data analyst. He was seeing a ghost. Thwack. The sound of his heels snapping together echoed in the sudden silence. Colonel Marcus Thorne, a man who commanded respect from the most hardened warriors, stood at perfect attention. He cleared his throat, his voice now devoid of anger, filled instead with a tone of profound deference that stunned every man present. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent desert. "You will stand down and show respect. We are in the presence of Captain Alara Vance." He paused, letting the rank sink in, before delivering the final, earth-shattering blow. "Lead marksman, for the Chimera program." The laughter had died. The smirks had vanished. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the range. The Chimera program wasn't just a classified project. To most of them, it was a myth, a boogeyman story whispered in secure briefing rooms about impossible shots made in impossible conditions. And the ghost of that story was standing right in front of them. In the stunned silence, Alara walked to the portable whiteboard where Corrigan's failed calculations were still displayed. With a quiet swipe of her hand, she erased his neat formulas. She picked up a marker, and her hand began to move with a speed and precision that was mesmerizing. She filled the board not with simple ballistics, but with a web of complex equations that made Corrigan's math look like elementary school arithmetic. "Your calculations only account for primary variables," she said, her voice taking on a new authority. It was the voice of a teacher, a master of a craft they were only just beginning to comprehend. "You're missing the tertiary effects. Barrel harmonics change with heat. There are microatmospheric density shifts along the bullet's entire flight path. And you're not factoring spin drift relative to thermal layering from the ground." The snipers stared, dumbfounded. It was a level of analysis none of them had ever conceived. "Captain." A new voice cut in. A man in a crisp naval intelligence uniform was striding toward the group. "Commander Grant." His presence here was as unexpected as the shot itself. "I see you couldn't help yourself." Alara capped the marker. "The exercise parameters were flawed, Commander. They were teaching a false limitation." Grant offered a thin, knowing smile. He addressed the bewildered operators. "For those of you wondering, what you just witnessed was not a fluke. Captain Vance holds the confirmed long-distance engagement record, a record so classified, its very existence is denied." He paused. "She is also a recipient of the Medal of Honor, though you will never find her name in any public file." A wave of shock rippled through the men. "The Yemen operation," one of the older SEALs muttered, his eyes wide. "That was her. I thought that was just a legend." "It was very real," Grant confirmed, his tone turning somber. He looked at Alara, whose gaze had become distant. A high-value target was located in a dense urban environment during a sandstorm that grounded every drone and aircraft we had. A 10-minute window of exposure. Intel said the shot was impossible. 3 shots, Alara said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. 3 targets. Simultaneously neutralized, Grant continued for her. Through a sandstorm, at over 3,000 meters. 0 misses. No one else on Earth could have made that shot. Corrigan, looking utterly humbled, finally spoke. "But, something went wrong. That's why the program was shuttered. Why you disappeared." A shadow crossed Alara's face. She turned away, her eyes fixed on the distant, broken target. "My calculations were perfect," she said, her voice flat and hollow. "My intelligence was not." Grant's voice softened. "The target was using human shields. Intelligence failed to identify them. A local doctor and his 10-year-old daughter, forced into the line of fire at the last second. The air grew heavy with the weight of that tragedy. These men understood the cost of war, the ghosts that follow you home. I calculated the physics," Alara said, her voice laced with a pain that 3 years of hiding hadn't erased. "I never calculated the human cost. After that, I requested a transfer. I chose to analyze data, not create it." "The world has changed, Alara," Commander Grant said, his voice pulling her back from the ghosts of Yemen. "The threats we face have evolved. The Chimera program is being reactivated. We don't just need it back. We need you to lead it. As head instructor. Elara was about to refuse, to retreat back into the comfortable anonymity of her data files, but then something happened. Rex Hammer Corrigan, the man who had mocked her hours earlier, stepped forward. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, profound humility. He unclipped the custom-built, multi-$1,000 Hensoldt scope from his rifle, his most prized possession. He held it out to her. "Captain," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I have never been so happy to be so wrong in my entire life. What you did today, that wasn't just shooting. It was art." The offering was a powerful surrender, an apology, and a plea in one gesture. Elara looked at the scope, then at the faces of the men around her. They were looking at her not as a freak or a ghost, but as a leader. She took the scope, the cold metal of familiar weight in her hand. A slow nod was her only reply. A wave of relief washed over the range. Her first act as instructor was to dismantle the old way. "Marksmanship isn't learned in a classroom," she declared to Colonel Thorne. "It's learned in the wind and the rain and the failing light." She then asked, "Who among you struggles the most with the conventional doctrine?" The men shifted, until a young woman stepped forward. Maya Jensen, a former Olympic archery champion, was smaller than the other trainees, and the instructors had constantly criticized her for her inability to muscle the recoil of heavy-caliber rifles. "They say I'm too small, ma'am," Maya said, her chin held high. "They're wrong," Elara replied simply. "Technique is a force multiplier. Meet me at the firing line." For the next hour, Elara didn't have Maya touch the rifle. Instead, she had her close her eyes. "Forget the math," Elara instructed, her voice low. "Feel the air on your skin. Is it a push or a pull? Listen to the silence between the gusts of wind. The shot exists in that silence." She was teaching a language beyond numbers, a sensory awareness that was second nature to an archer. When Maya finally settled behind the rifle, she moved with a new fluidity. She breathed, waited, and in a moment of pure intuition, squeezed the trigger. The shot was a dramatic improvement, landing just inches from the center. Maya looked up, her eyes wide with astonishment. Elara smiled for the first time that day, a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Precision isn't about strength," she said. "It's about seeing what everyone else misses." 6 months passed. The Chimera Advanced Tactics Center was transformed. Under Elara's guidance, the sniper program became a legend in the special operations community. Meditation and sensory awareness were now as crucial as ballistics charts. Accuracy rates soared. The impossible had become the new baseline. Elara had built a new team, with Corrigan as her second-in-command and Maya Jensen as her star pupil, a prodigy who could now rival Elara's own past achievements. One afternoon, as training concluded, Commander Grant appeared again. With him was a man in a tailored civilian suit who radiated the cold, clinical authority of Langley. "Captain Vance," the man began, his name was Albright. "Your program's results are remarkable. The Pentagon is very pleased." Elara felt a familiar tension in her shoulders. "Thank you, Mr. Albright. We have a situation developing in Kazakhstan," he said, getting straight to the point. "A critical threat. We need your perspective." "My perspective, or my skill set?" Elara asked, her voice level. "For now, consultation," Albright replied smoothly. "But we need the best." Elara's gaze drifted across the range. She saw Maya, calmly instructing a new recruit, guiding him through the breathing exercises she had taught her. She saw the quiet confidence in her students, a reflection of the purpose she had rediscovered in herself. 3 years ago, she had run from her gift. 6 months ago, she had been forced to reveal it. Now, she would choose how to use it. She turned back to Albright, her ice-blue eyes meeting his without hesitation. "Consultation only," she said firmly. "I don't take shots anymore." Then she added the crucial words he was waiting for. But I will tell you who can, and exactly how they'll do it. It will be on my terms. Albright allowed a small, satisfied smile. Of course, Captain. On your terms. As the men walked away, Elara stood alone, the setting sun casting her long shadow across the range. She was no longer a ghost hiding from her past. She was a master, in full control of her future. In a world of impossible threats, she had become the one who defined what was possible. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are those no one sees coming. Elara's story reminds us that true strength often hides in the most unexpected places. Have you ever known someone who was underestimated like this? Share your story in the comments, and please, let's keep the discussion respectful. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe and share. See you in the next one.